No year is going to be perfect. There are some days that are going to feel pretty close to perfect. There are some days that are going to feel pretty far from perfect. But let's look at it overall. We can nitpick the days and the weeks, but all of those together is what's going to give you the outcome.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course, because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
365 days a year, a homeschool mom tends to ask herself, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough homeschool? Am I doing well in my motherhood? Am I doing enough as a wife? Am I doing enough as a homemaker? You know, the inner monologue that's going on in your head and the questions that you have. And it all centers around this question of, am I doing enough? And then at the end of the homeschool year, we ask this question, did I do enough this homeschool year? Now, I think that a lot of the questions that come up constantly and consistently during the homeschool year and just during the year and every day when we ask ourselves if we're doing enough, it's because we feel maybe guilty, and it sometimes is driven by something negative. But I think it's a really good question to ask ourselves as we get to the end of a homeschool year and say, did I do enough as you reflect back upon the previous homeschool year? I'm going to be asking myself the same question. I've been asking myself the same question, just like you are experiencing it every day. I am definitely going to ask myself that this at the end of this homeschool year. We're not quite done. We're kind of doing things a little bit more part-time right now. It's just kind of what happens as kids get older and they get jobs and there's just other activities and stuff. And so I really do a bulk. Like, we just dive in deep, especially in the winter when we're just home and snowed in. We were snowed in a lot this past winter. But hey, welcome to May. Spring is here and we are definitely on the up and up. So I ask myself this question all year long. And at the end of the year, I will say, did I do enough? And take some time to really evaluate. But in the end, I have to just say to myself, it has to be enough. The homeschool year is done. I can't go back. I can't change time. However, we can use what we have learned and adjust for the next homeschool year. I did do an episode a couple of weeks back about reflecting upon the end of the homeschool year. I highly recommend that episode, and I will drop that link in the show notes for you. But I'm the type of person that just says, well, that's what it was. And I can learn from this and we can adjust for next year, but I can't go back. And you can't go back either. And so let's use this time to really think about this question so that you can make some good choices for the next homeschool year. And so I was just like that. I was like, well, all right, we're just going to move into summer. And doesn't mean that summer has to be a free-for-all. We'll talk about this in some future episodes. But I can use this summer to make some adjustments and get myself ready and prepared so that at the end of the year, I can feel really good about the next year. And so I'm going to be asking myself this question about now. Did I do enough? Well, there's always things that I wish that I had covered, some things that we just didn't get to, but it's not for a lack of trying. There's the key. And it doesn't mean that we have to try and 24/7 and we have to be so intense about it and legalistic about it. There just is only so much time that we have every homeschool year. And so let me share some thoughts with you as you ask this question of yourself so that you can get to the other side of it and hopefully feel really good about your homeschool year. And now that hopefully the weather is nicer, I would encourage you to get outside, get the kids playing outside, maybe give them a little kiddie pool or some sand or something that you know that's going to keep them occupied for a while. And you can maybe just sit there as well and take some time to really get quiet and think about this homeschool year. Reflect upon it. You probably already know if you did enough this homeschool year. Most of the time, as homeschool moms, we are intentional. We aren't homeschooling so that we just don't have to put our kids on the bus. We aren't homeschooling because it would be easier. I mean, we can weigh those pros and cons. What's easier? Is it easier to have to do all the work to get the kids out the door and then they're gone all day, and then you have homework and all the things and the being tired and hungry when they get home and the dealing with a school system? Is that easier than having them home? I mean, you're homeschooling. So whether it's easier or not, there are pros and cons to both. But we are typically, overall, very intentional and thoughtful. The homeschool moms that I have encountered, that I have spoken to, done mentorship with, that have been in my programs, I've interacted with at conventions and at the Little by Little Homeschool Conference. Hint, hint, if you haven't gotten your ticket, make sure you do that. The tickets are available right now, and the link is in the show notes. But the moms that I speak to, they do so much. They are so thoughtful and intentional and want to cover so much. And most of the time, we do absolutely enough. We do plenty. But we think to ourselves, did I do enough? Because there's still 5, 10, 15, 20 other books or resources or topics I wanted to cover, and we didn't get to it. Maybe you would have if your family stayed up 24/7 for the entire homeschool year and you didn't have any breaks. You might be able to get to everything. But is that a quality of life that you want? Probably not. After a couple days, our bodies start shutting down and we just fall asleep. So you're not going to be able to stay up and do all that. That's kind of an extreme example. But even if you spent hours upon hours upon hours every single day, is that what you're going for with homeschool? Most likely you're looking for relationships as well with your kids. No year is going to be perfect. There are some days that are going to feel pretty close to perfect. There are some days that are going to feel pretty far from perfect. But let's look at it overall. We can nitpick the days and the weeks, but all of those together is what's going to give you the outcome. And no year is going to be perfect. But overall, were you consistent with your goals? Were you consistent with pouring into your kids? Were you consistent with being intentional about how you spent your time and the curriculum that you used and the resources that you used and the topics that you introduced and the conversations that you had and the life skills that you taught them and all of those things? Were you consistent with them? It all adds up, little by little. That's why I call this little by little, because a little at a time, just one foot in front of the other, is how we get to the end of our homeschool years. Now, I am almost close. Well, I've had about a year, I guess, until I'll be at the end of my homeschool career. And did I do enough? Yeah, I did enough. Did I do everything I wanted to? No. I can still think of the things that I would like to introduce and the topics and the field trips and just all the things that I would love to do with my young adults. But they're kind of like, that's a little weird, Mom. So we have conversations at dinner. We'll have other conversations. These are things I bring up or I send them podcasts, but they're not under my wing as far as their education and the bulk of how they spend their time. We're never going to cover everything. But when we instill in them a desire and a love of learning, and we show them that this is what God desires for you, to learn more about the world and the people in it, and how we can serve and glorify Him, and how we can serve and love other people, then they will continue in their own way, in their own bent of how their personality, how God has wired them. They will find ways to be able to do that, and they will continue to learn. Are we all going to know everything? No, because if you did, you would be God, and none of us are He. And I have no desire to know everything. But together, it's kind of really actually cool when you look at, say, you and your husband, and together the things you know so many things that he doesn't know, he knows things that you don't know, and together you guys are a pretty mighty force. So let's go back to the homeschool year. Overall, were you consistent with your goals, or did you squander and waste too many days? Now, I'm not talking about having to take days off because you're just like, I need an emotional or mental or physical break. Or maybe you've had another baby, or there's been some type of big event in your family, or there's been trips, or there's just been something. So I'm not talking about days that have been purposely, because of a reason, have been set aside as a rest day or as a day to recuperate or as a day that your family just needs a break. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about squandering and wasting days. What does a squandered and wasted day look like? It looks like probably too much time on screens. It looks like, I would say more so for you, squandering and wasting your days, because most times if our kids see that we aren't engaging them in their academics, they will go then and play. And play is a great form of learning for kids. But I think when I'm talking about, well, I know when I'm talking about squandering the day, is by you just starting off the day, not even really with a plan, not having an idea what to do, and just kind of going wherever the wind takes you. Now, this isn't not unschooling. This is different than unschooling. This is purposely just not being intentional. Unschoolers are intentional about what they were doing. So that's not what I'm saying. It's about just kind of letting things go. And unschooling can kind of run the gamut as well. I know some unschoolers who are very free with it, but they're not squandering and wasting their days. You know what a squandered and wasted day looks like. Again, this is not the same as taking a rest day. It is squandering the time. It is maybe getting sucked into Instagram and doom scrolling for an hour when you're supposed to do morning time. That's the type of squandering I'm talking about. But just remember, overall, put one foot in front of the other, be consistent, and I can almost guarantee you'll get to the end of the year and say, we did enough. Did we do it all? No, but doing it all does not necessarily mean doing enough. Doing enough is enough. So you're thinking to yourself, did I do enough? Here are some areas to look through. Go back and look through the curriculum that you have used. Go back and look through the math book, the language arts book, the history, the science, and see how far you actually have come. It's amazing when just day after day after day, and I'm not saying don't take a break, definitely take breaks, but just all of that adds up. The little by little definitely adds up. Take a look back through your photos on your phone and your videos. Sometimes we can forget the great things that we did, the simple days, maybe the field trips, maybe the day of baking, or maybe the day of going and doing some fall activities. We forget about that when it comes to be springtime. So take a look back through your photos and your videos and remind yourself what you did this year. Also look back through your book lists. I love to keep book lists. When I began homeschooling, it was in the state of Pennsylvania, and you had to provide a book list for every subject that you did. And so I always kept track of all the resources we used, but also all the books that my kids read. I can go back. So my daughter would have been in third grade, and so I would have had first. Well, I didn't have to. You don't have to report until I forget what age. Second is usually around second or third grade. So from then on, I have written down on lists up through 12th grade all of the books that they read, the books that we did in morning time. It's been a great resource to be able to go back and look. So if you are not keeping up with a book list, I encourage you to. And this doesn't have to be something that is legalistic or that if you miss a book that it's doomsday. It absolutely is not. And not something that is supposed to be one more burden upon you. I think it's fun to write it down and to then be able to look back and say, wow, look at all the books that we read. When at the time, as we're going through the homeschool year, and then at the end of the homeschool year, you might be like, what do we have to show for this? Go back and look at that book list and say, wow, look at all that we did. Sometimes I would look back and I'd say, oh, especially the past couple of years when it's he and I, I'm like, did we really do much? And I'll write down all the books that we read and we discussed and the resources we used just in morning time. And I'll say, oh, wow, we covered a lot this year. That's a really great list, and I'm really happy about that. So go back and look at your book lists. If you don't make a book list, I encourage you to go ahead and start doing that. Just get a notebook. It doesn't have to be anything special or anything. So the word enough is subjective. What you might think is enough might be different than your friend, might be different than the other homeschool mom that is listening to this podcast episode. We get to decide what is enough. And that enough can be different each year, and it should really align with our goals. And so when you start to think back and compare your goals and your ideas that you had previous to starting this homeschool year, how did you do meeting those? And it doesn't mean that if you didn't meet any of those or all of those that you're a failure. You absolutely are not. But did you take time to work on those? When our minds are fresh before a homeschool year, we typically have some really great ideas. We're say, oh, I definitely want to cover that. And I definitely want to talk about that. I want to do these certain books maybe in morning time. And we can get lost in just the day-to-day and all of the busyness of the homeschool year. Take some time right now and go back and look at those goals and ideas. Did you hit some of them? And if you didn't, that's okay. They can go roll over into the summer. They can roll over into the next homeschool year. If you're concerned about these goals and how to set that, that's what we will do together in your homeschool blueprint. I encourage you to go over it and get into that. You can work on that and have your next homeschool year set up for absolute success, and you guys will be able to say then at the end of the year that you did enough and feel really good about it. You can get more information at littlebylittlehomeschool.com/blueprint, and the link is in the show notes. But again, enough is subjective. Your enough needs to align with your family, culture, your values, and your style of homeschooling and what your goals are. My state currently that I live in is the state of New York, and legally they say enough, how they define enough, is completing 80% of a curriculum for each of the subjects. So we'll take math. And if you have completed 80% of what you said that you were going to complete at the beginning of the year, then you can consider your homeschool year complete and that you did do enough. Now, I live in a pretty strict state. We have to do a lot of different things for the regulations, and if they're saying 80% is enough, it doesn't mean that you have to do all of the curriculum. A lot of the math, at least the ones that I used, I found that by the end, they were wrapping it up. They might introduce some new topics and some new methods because in the next level, they were going to really get into that deep. And just by kind of introducing it a little bit, the kid might be like, oh, okay, when it gets to the next homeschool year, I remember something about this. But there's a lot of review when it comes to the end of certain curriculum. But other things, I was like, we're actually really doing well with this science. We really like it. We don't want to just end it. We want to do the extra 20%. And there were plenty of times that we did an entire curriculum because it was right for us. And it was something that we wanted to complete. Now, maybe you're at that 80% with your science and you're saying, we really like it, but I don't want to do this through the summer. You don't have to. I mean, you could maybe just do the science through the summer, but you can roll that into the next homeschool year. You can finish up that 20% and then move on to the next one. Nobody says that every piece of curriculum, every book that you do for your formal academics has to be brand new, page 1 of it, starting on the first day of your homeschool year. So put that in the back of your mind, the 80% that is legally in the regulations when it comes to a very strict state, if you're kind of wondering. And again, it's a roundabout. And remember, enough is subjective. I can almost guarantee that you have done enough. When we are intentional, we tend to do enough. If you are enjoying this podcast, I'd love to be able to hear about that. A great way to do that is to leave me a rating and review. That actually also helps to push out the podcast to other homeschool moms who are either thinking about homeschooling or are homeschooling currently and they have some questions. So you can scroll down or somewhere on your podcast app. I know if you're on Apple, you can scroll down. If you're on Spotify, you have to then leave a review on a specific podcast episode, which could be this one right here. So I thank you in advance for those ratings and reviews, and I'll see you back here next time.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.